Pete Oliver has held a number of different roles within the climate space, and so I think I'll let you introduce yourself. But I think for the purpose of this webinar, Pete has a deep expertise in decarbonization around the supply chain and understanding kind of what that means in a broad sense. So,
Perfect.
Pete, do you want to just give a short intro and then we can jump into the questions?
Yeah, thanks everyone. And thanks, Danny, for inviting me on. A pleasure to get a chance to chat with you all. My background is primarily in carbon removal and decarbonization. I am the founder of a company called Arc Climate. We help large corporations decarbonize their supply chains, specifically to lower the cost of capital to do that work. And I've kind of been in innovation and looking at both carbon markets, carbon financing, and practical decarbonization. So that's my world.
Good stuff, Pete. So we got two questions for you.
Yep.
We did a kind of a quick run through the first few folks, and we want to take a little bit more time with some of our deep experts. So I think there's going to be kind of two questions for you, Pete. One is a look backwards and one is a look forward. So maybe for the look backwards, holy cow, have a lot of things changed with primarily SBTI, which then drives down into the REC market, which is renewable energy certificates for those of you who aren't familiar. So that's all of your green energy, as well as carbon offsets. So that has been a wildly hot topic in 2024. So Pete, could you just kind of run us around, like what's been changing in the last year in those topics?
Yeah, so wild year for carbon markets. I would say bumpy year for carbon markets.
Yeah.
We kind of still very much down from just from a broad market perspective, from the highs of 2020, 2021. Seen a couple consecutive years of decline in terms of volume traded. Um, uh, Retirements are relatively flat as people kind of continue to move through the commitments that they have made. But the overall market, I would say, what you're seeing is kind of what people are both happy and uncomfortable with this, which is a flight to quality, which is both a good thing for the market in that people say, hey, we want to do, we want to be really clear about what it is we're getting when we invest in carbon removals or carbon offsets. Um, and uncomfortably, a lot of what, happened in this really kind of like frothy period around 2021, 2022 has come under a lot of scrutiny, um, and not borne up so well. And so that's kind of like brings us to this past year in which we have um, the two different kind of international organizations that have very similar acronyms, but both around the integrity of the quality of the credits that are being issued. The no, I don't, I'll go back and forth on this.
Is
Um,
it alpha? Is it a more alphabet soup, Pete?
sorry, ICVCM.
There
It's the
you go.
Integrity Council for the voluntary carbon market. So, like, to give you an idea of the level of scrutiny they're putting on here, um, they have recognized only uh, about 5% of the issued carbon credits over the last year, which means that like there's an idea, hey, this is a wide market and it's used for a lot of different things. And I'll get into that idea in just a minute, but like what are we actually doing and like can we look clearly at that now? And I think after in 2023 we saw The Guardian, BBC, a bunch of other reporting that was kind of held up a very uncomfortable mirror to the voluntary carbon market community. I think there
Absolutely.
has been a really positive response in the wider community, which is like, okay, great, let's face these things. We can face them now. Um, so I would say, like, if you were to say, uh, well, voluntary carbon market, I'm not sure how real that is. Like, I think retrospectively, I think that is a reasonable evaluation of the quality of work that has gone on until now. I would say prospectively, you're going to see much higher quality work being done across the board, which is good for everybody.
Good.
I think just to give you an idea of scale, like in 2022, the voluntary carbon market was about a $2 billion market. Now it's something less than $1 billion. We'll get those
Wow.
figures at the
So
in
it's been like
next
chopped
year.
in half.
Yeah, so it's about half of that now. So
Wow.
we don't
I
know
did
what
not
the
realize that.
yeah. So
Does
it's
Yeah.
um
well,
Yeah,
Danny,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna, is it, I think like, given all that, like, and pivoting to, what a lot of the people now are kind of trying to figure out, we saw a lot of this. I like your flight to quality. I like your kind of, the way you frame that. What do companies do with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I think there is a lot going on there, and then it's hard to kind of understand the signals from and the whole noise of the matter.
Yeah, and I think it's worth like thinking about what to do now, right? I think it's worth dividing the underlying needs that drive the voluntary carbon market. So I think that there are like two core things that the voluntary market is for at this point. And it's worth thinking about how to address those different competing interests. Maybe not competing, but different value propositions that the VCM provides. So the first one is that the VCM is just a way to comply. You have to do things from the voluntary carbon market um, in order to like I want to make sure, so and so says that we can this particular, for example, a CBAM or one of California's regulations says that you can use the voluntary carbon market to get to hit a certain sort of regulatory target that you want to hit. That is a way of kind of like, okay, great, we're going to do this work. And I think that work basically can and should continue. Um, I think as a part of that compliance view of the voluntary carbon market, there's also a way in which a corporation can use this to kind of front run regulatory um, uh, opportunities or challenges that they think are going to happen soon. So, hey, we're going to have to start dealing with this come 2027. How do we start dealing with it now so that we're not caught off guard? So both of those are kind of like compliance oriented ways of viewing it. The second would be like a philanthropic look at the voluntary carbon market, which is like we're doing this because we should, or because our stakeholders want to, our staff wants us to, our leadership wants us to. This is a change we want to see in the world. This is
It's
typically driven internally by the factors I just listed, or is associated with positive PR. I think
what's
we
fun.
all know that PR is, that side of this equation has really fallen down over the course of the last 2 years, and people are saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, should I be doing this to get good
Yep.
PR?"
Is it worth it?
Yeah,
Anecdotally,
100.
yeah, I would say anecdotally, people are kind of saying, "Hey, I want to keep my head down right now. I'm worried about doing this work and it potentially being a liability."
And
So
what's
I
been
guess like,
interesting, Pete, is if I
yeah,
can interrupt,
yeah,
please. It's interesting because I think you're right on the two drivers, and where a lot of our clients, especially being in the industrial space, have not started on their voluntary journey yet. But to your
yep,
point, I actually would argue the ones that seem to be the most serious are looking at it in both of those ways, which is actually pretty cool. So it doesn't have those don't have to be mutually exclusive. We certainly see companies that are only looking at it as I want to make sure I'm staying ahead of compliance, or only looking at it as I want to engage in my stakeholders. But it's actually interesting. I feel like the conversations we've had, those are the two drivers. It's really great that you bring that perspective because it really does seem like as companies are starting to think about this in 24, 25, they're trying to make sense of the voluntary market. Those do seem to be the two big topics. Go ahead.
yeah. And can I just add this one
Please.
bit here before I wrap, which is just basically, I think that we are at a point of transformation for the VCM in which corporations are going to be moving from those views of compliance or of philanthropy towards a value creation or an opportunity
Mm.
um, view on the voluntary carbon market, which is how do we use the VCM to drive value back into our business? And let's look at that action through a value lens, right? So um,
In
corporations
setting.
that have been
Yeah.
doing internal carbon pricing, for example, to either drive the philanthropic side or compliance action, can now look at that and say, hey, this is now our investment budget. Or what is like, how do we take the sustainability budget and turn it into product transformation, risk reduction, cost
Yeah.
reduction, et cetera? And so I think there's an opportunity for both corporations and sustainability leaders to get closer to their businesses and see
Hmm.
this as an opportunity to do the kind of work that will result in the organizational change that they want to see anyway. And that can be the kinds of stuff you guys have talked about. Hey, we think PFAS is going to be a problem. We want to get ahead of that. We've got to transform our product. Here's how we do that.
Fast.
So I think that is if I were to say what's next for the VCM, it's the transformation from compliance or philanthropy into value creation.
Well, it speaks really to your earlier point, which is a lot of this is like trying to make sure that the VCMs themselves are doing something, right?
Yep.
And now it's like, okay, now that they're doing something, let's apply it
Yeah,
actually to a, to driving real value within the company and meeting the needs of the company.
It's hard to do, and it takes a lot of planning, but if you can execute on it, that is wildly compelling. Cool. Well, hey, Pete, it's great. Thanks for joining us.